As you know, we're working our way through the book of Proverbs, and it really is, and I hope you're seeing this. It really is a practical book that looks at real life settings and gives us insight into how to deal with them. And when you look at those things that we've covered, a lot of those things are very positive moments. They're moments that we welcome and we find pleasure in. One of the weeks we focused in on friends, and who doesn't enjoy getting together with their friends? We spent some time talking about our finances, and when you manage your finances well, when you get to the end of the month, it's not a stressful thing. It's like, well, hey, this is great. Things are going well. Whenever we do the next right thing in our life, it's a good time. It's something that's pleasurable, that we want more of in our life. Unfortunately, there's a lot of moments in our life that are not welcome. They're not a whole lot of fun. We'd just as soon avoid them, and that's kind of the case this morning, because we're going to focus in on conflict. And what I'm talking about is every now and then we have to deal with people that have a combative, a very quarrelsome, very debative, very argumentative spirit. And in our dealings with them, what tends to happen is the stress level goes up, the strife, the friction goes up, and conflict tends to hurt and divide our relationships. And in the me first, broken world we live in, it really is inevitable. We will experience conflict, probably often. I think overwhelmingly, most of the time, conflict is because we're different. And the reality is we really don't handle difference very well. And what I'm getting at is difference is not a moral issue. I joke a lot about the Eagles and the 49ers, that sort of thing. That's not a moral issue. I like the Eagles. I grew up in Philadelphia. There's a lot of people that grew up in Philadelphia that like the Eagles. I'm not the only one. You guys, many of you were born and raised in this area. You like the 49ers, or you like the Giants, and I like the Phillies. It's not a moral issue. It's not a right or wrong issue. But the reason most of our conflict is tied to difference is because we treat it as if it were a moral issue. But it's not just the fact that we're different. We're also broken. And that means we're going to do things that hurt other people, and that introduces conflict. If someone lies to you, and you discover the lie, and you know it's something that just kind of blows you away, conflict is pretty much inevitable, and it's directly tied to the fact they lied to you. So we will experience conflict because we're different, because we're broken. And when we experience it, we all have kind of a unique way of dealing with it. We have our own, kind of personal coping mechanisms. Some people, I put myself in this category. I don't necessarily like conflict, but my attitude is, okay, if I'm going to have conflict, let's get it over with. And my mentality is there is no better time to deal with this than right now. And so let's have at it and get this resolved, because the faster we deal with it and put it behind us, we don't have to deal with it anymore. And it's funny how God puts people together, because my wife is more like number 3. But oh well, that's a different story. Some people are comfortable, very assertive, very direct. Other people kind of retreat into more passive-aggressive behaviors. And what I mean by that is there's a disconnect between what they say and what they actually do. And they may say, "Oh, okay, this is all good. It's all fine. Nothing's wrong." It's like when you ask somebody, "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." You kind of know something's wrong, right? So they present nothing's wrong, but then you look at what they do, and there's a disconnect. And they may kind of retreat into sullenness. They may act like they're helpless. They may procrastinate and drag their feet. They may intentionally fail. Why? Because they're really not happy. They're just saying they're happy. Passive aggressive. An avoidant is someone who is so uncomfortable with conflict, they will go out of their way to avoid it. They just don't want any conflict. I would rather live with the pain and live with the problems than deal with it. And it's slightly different than number 4, because number 4 is really a dangerous place to be, because that's where you give up. And I tell couples over all the time, I would rather have you fight like cats and dogs than to give up. Because when you give up, you don't care anymore. You've resigned yourself. This is the way it's going to be. It's never going to change. And you just stop trying. You know who never stops trying? Satan. And when he sees someone give up, and I'm talking about a relationship here, you give up because it's never going to change. He sees that as a vulnerability, and I guarantee you, whatever problem you're being, dealt with here, that you can't find satisfaction and you've given up, all of a sudden he's going to start dangling that carrot in front of you over here. I tell you all the time, what's the most common answer when the question is asked, why did you have an affair? I don't know. It just happened. Well, guess what? I do know. And it didn't just happen. There was a vulnerability here, and Satan exploited it here. And that's how it happened. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Don't give up. Now, conflict is inevitable. Here's what we need to really recognize and accept this as a reality. I cannot change the fact that I live in a broken world amongst broken people, and conflict is going to be a way of life. You know what I do control? How I respond. And I better figure out how to respond in a positive way, because my response is going to determine the outcome of the conflict. For instance, if you know how to resolve conflict, you respond to the problem in a Christ-like way, you respond with all the wisdom of Solomon, the experience of going through the conflict is actually a bonding experience that brings you together and makes you better and makes you stronger in your relationship. If, on the other hand, you don't know how to respond in a positive way to conflict, that poor response can trigger a negative cycle that just kind of spins out of control. So we really need to learn how to diffuse conflict, and this is where Solomon comes in. So the plan today is we're going to start, and we're going to look at and recognize, you know what? Conflict really threatens the quality of our life, and Solomon's going to conjure up a number of images, word pictures, if you will, and we'll get the idea that, man, this threatens our way of life. Then we're going to look at 7 practical steps that we can take to diffuse it. So we're going to start with the threat. Proverbs 26:17 says, like one who seizes a dog by the ears is a passerby who meddles in a quarrel not his own. Or like a madman shooting firebrands or deadly arrows is a man who deceives his neighbor and says, I was only joking. Without wood, what happens? A fire goes out. Without gossip, a quarrel dies down. As charcoal to embers, as wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. You see, he's painting a picture here, and we're going to look at a bunch of them. But he starts with this idea, conflict can be like taking a dog by the ears. Now, we'll do an unscientific poll. Do you think he's thinking of a little poodle? Do you think he's thinking of a Pomeranian or one of them sissy dogs? There are two kinds of dogs. There's sissy dogs and real dogs. You can call a sissy dog a cat dog because it's like a substitute for a cat. I think he's thinking of things like pit bulls, Rottweilers, and Dobermans. Our son, who lost his wife a few years ago and has 2 boys that he's now raising on his own, and a house and a job and a couple side jobs, one day decided to get a pit bull. And because the people that were giving him the pit bull actually had 2, he got 2. And I said, Vinny, what were you thinking? And here's the way to shut Dad up. Dad, it's the first time I've seen my kids smile in a long time. And instantly, okay, it's a good idea. Even though it isn't, it's a good idea. I've seen these dogs in action. Their idea of playing, you know how dogs are playful? You would not want to get in between these guys. I can't imagine grabbing them by the ears. You'd lose your hand. Solomon says that's what conflict is like. Conflict's like a madman just indiscriminately shooting arrows in the air. In the Detroit area, they have a very large Muslim population. And I guess this is native to the Middle East. New Year's, Christmas, the sun came up. We're going to shoot guns into the air. Okay, guess what? There's this thing called gravity. All those bullets you're shooting in the air, they're going to come down somewhere. Hopefully not on my head or on yours, because when they fall from that distance, they will kill you. A madman shooting arrows without any regard for the harm it may cause. Or he compares it to a fire that consumes anything he touches, but he doesn't stop there. We've looked at Proverbs 17, verse 14 earlier in our study for one of the other aspects of our study. But he compares conflict to a flood, starting a quarrel. It's like breaching a dam. What's a dam? It's when you dam up a river, and what happens? The water starts piling up behind it. And if that dam fails, if the dam is breached, what happens? All that water that is now piled up comes gushing out, and everything downstream is wiped out. And I think this is such a good picture because a lot of times our attitudes when things arise is we have a sentiment, a mentality. I don't want to rock the boat. Anybody ever respond to some kind of irritation or problem? I don't want to rock the boat. Okay, you've just turned yourself into a dam or a volcano. I generally use volcano, but Solomon's using dams, and I'm going to work with Solomon because he's smarter than me. So the water starts piling up because guess what? We come across disappointments and irritations and little grievances and hurts constantly. And the closer we are, the more that happens. You know, in relationships, I talk a lot about love banks, and there's deposits and the withdrawals. Well, the withdrawals begin to pile up and pile up and pile up. And sooner or later, what happens? The volcano blows, or the dam is breached because the pressure has gotten too great. The idea that, okay, I don't want to rock the boat. In our minds, it's a good idea. In reality, it just means when the dam breaks, the flood is going to be much more catastrophic than if we rock the boat regularly. In fact, I tell couples all the time, it's kind of reverse psychology. In my mind, the worst years of your marriage should be about the first 3, because that's where you're learning to live together. Because you put this different person with that different person in a close environment, and they both bring their expectations of how it's going to be and what it's going to be like in there. There's going to be a lot of clashing. And that's the time you get all those clashes resolved so that, you know what? Once they're gone, I don't have to deal with them any longer. So it's very difficult the first couple of years when you're figuring all that out. And then ideally, it's smooth sailing afterwards. If 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road, you're knocking on my door saying, hey, can we have an appointment? Almost every single time, it's because in those first 3 years, when it was optimum for working it out, you didn't work it out. And those things grew roots. And now they're firmly established in your relationship, and you want to change them. And it would have been really easy to change them here. Really hard to change them there. Anyway, starting a quarrel can be like a flood. Now, right up front, I apologize for this text on Mother's Day. May I point out, I didn't write this, Solomon did. A foolish son is his father's ruin, and a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping. A quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. Now, Solomon said this. Number 2, do you realize Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I bet you at least one of them was grumpy. Number 3, who's writing this? Solomon. Do you suppose if we gave a pen and paper to one of those 700 wives or 300 concubines, write a couple Proverbs about dealing with Solomon when he's in a grumpy mood? Because I have a feeling Solomon was in a grumpy mood. Anybody with 700 wives and 300 is going to have grumpy moods. I can guarantee that. So, just saying. Let's get to the point he's trying to make. Dealing with a contentious person, a quarrelsome person, is about as pleasant as one of those days that we get in the wintertime when it just is raining and raining and raining, and it just kind of dreary and dark, and the wind is kicking up, and it's chilly. Because we don't have winter in California, unless you're up in, the Sierras. We have, fall and spring and summer. We don't have winter in the valley. But I know you don't agree. That's okay. It's okay to disagree. And it's one of those days, it's just, oh man, why can't it rain at night when I'm sleeping? And then the rain doesn't bother me during the day. That's what he's comparing it to. Constant dripping of a rainy day. But pay particular attention to verse 16, because he's making a point that's very similar to the whole flood thing. Restraining her is like restraining the wind. Have you had any luck? I know, Conrad, you're a golfer. Have you had any luck restraining the wind when you're ready to hit a shot? Me neither. Or it's like grasping oil with your hand. I don't know that I've ever done that, but you know what I have done? Anybody here ever do a grease pig? It is not easy, because I don't know what you call it, but man, they are firm. They're their muscles are really firm, and when you grab them, they kind of like shake, and they just slip right through your hands. It is so easy. And what is he saying? He's saying if you get to the point where the resentment, where the bitterness has built up, the quarrel at that point is inevitable. There's no way to prevent it. There's no way to stop it. You can't restrain it. You can't hold it back. So once again, the answer here is don't let the hurt, don't let the disappointment build to the place where resentment and bitterness means we are going to have conflict. Deal with things as they arise before they grow roots. One last set of Proverbs. Proverbs 21, verse 9, better to live on the corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and ill-tempered wife. You see the picture that he's painting here? None of us would want to live in the corner of a housetop. We much prefer living under the roof in the actual structure. It's way more comfortable. But Solomon says, oh no, if in the home it's a quarrelsome environment, it's better to be up on the roof by yourself. Or he compares it to a desert. And that was a very common environment to the Middle East, to Israel. It's common in the state of California. We have Death Valley. We have the Mojave Desert. And if you've ever been to those places, it's really easy to figure out why so few people live out there. It's not a pleasant place. Now, with modern technology, I know they have places over in the Middle East, and you look at them, and they are modern cities that look amazing. Guess what? None of those were there when Solomon wrote this. They were deserts. They were hot, and there was a lack of water, and that's why nobody wanted to live there. And Solomon says that's what living in a contentious environment is like. It's like living in a desert. It's like living in the corner of the rooftop. It's an unpleasant, uncomfortable position. He's painting all of these images. Taking a dog by the ear, shooting arrows in the air, a consuming fire, a flood, dripping of a rainy day, the discomfort of a desert, all to make us aware conflict is really going to threaten the quality of our life and the quality of our relationship. So we're going to change gears and we're going to pivot to, okay, if this is such a threat, what can I do to diffuse it so I don't experience that destruction that conflict can bring in my relationship? So we're going to look at 7. Figure out, how can I be this patient man? How can I be that one who takes control of his temper? Number 1, check your ego. Pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. And what Solomon is getting at is really a simple truth. And it explains why we have conflict. Because if either party, and it only takes one person, if either party says, you know what, I don't want to fight over this, I'm just going to concede, my point, we'll do it your way, that sort of thing. You can't have conflict, can you? So the only way you have conflict is we have two people, both of which are unwilling to give up their position. So why do we do that? Because we think our way is the right way. We think our way is the best way. And the more we insist on my way, because my way is the best way, the more likely it is that we're going to have conflict, because the other party, who also is unwilling to give up their position, thinks the exact same thing. I've said this many times, because And I guess it's because of my direct assertive nature. People have told you think you're always right. Well, yeah, I do. I don't intentionally hold on to things that I think are wrong just so you can't say you think you're always right. No, if I think it's the right thing to think until I find something better. And when I find something better to think, I get rid of that one and then I replace it with this one. And guess what? You're the exact same way. We don't intentionally, I don't run around saying the earth is flat. That's nonsense, right? We think our way is right. We think our way is best. The other party feels the same way. And so we have conflict. And in the process of the conflict, we start getting frustrated and we start feeling disrespected. Because how can you not see that my way is the best? What's wrong with you? You must be, dumber than dirt to not see that my way is superior. And we really get frustrated. And you know who's telling you that you're right and best? That's your ego. And the whole point here is check your ego. Now, I'm not talking about moral issues where there's a clearly defined right and wrong, not because I said it's right or wrong, but because God said it was right or wrong. So I'm not talking about that. But if we're talking about a non-moral issue, it is okay for that other person to have their own thoughts on a given matter. And for me to think that my idea is superior to yours, that's my ego. And my ego needs to be checked. And as soon as I check my ego, guess what? I've just taken a step towards diffusing conflict in my life. Secondly, this maybe is the most important one. We need to learn how to respond to conflict in love. Now, Solomon uses a very strong word. In our culture, hatred stirs up dissension. The meaning of hatred in Solomon's time is very different than our own. The idea of hatred in Solomon's time is it's the opposite of love. Therefore, it's most often translated with the idea, the absence of love. Where does love focus? Focuses outward. It focuses on others. Where there is an absence of love, there is no outward focus. There is no focus on others. What's left? Me, myself, and I. My desires, my agenda, my whatever begin to dominate my thinking. And if you're in my way and you're hindering what I want, conflict is inevitable. And so when I say we need to develop a loving response, we need to develop a response that looks at others and looks for ways to serve others by meeting their needs, as opposed to a self-focus. Look at it from their perspective. And again, guess what? We've taken another step to diffusing the conflict. Number 3, control your tongue. I share Proverbs 15:1 all the time. You know why? Because it's true. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Look at Proverbs 18:6. A fool's lips bring him strife. His mouth invites a beating. If we respond to conflict carelessly, it can escalate things. It can make things worse. It's like throwing gas on the fire. If, however, we learn to respond with that soft answer, that gentle answer, we can actually calm things down so that when you're in a contentious situation, I don't know about you. Most people, I know it's true of me. If I'm in a contentious situation, my emotions are probably rising. They're strengthening. I may be running a little bit hot. And it's so easy when your emotions are rising to say the wrong thing as opposed to the right thing, or say the right thing in a wrong way. And so we're in that contentious situation where the emotions are running hot. We really need to be careful. Remember, what we're trying to do is solve the problem. We're not necessarily trying to win the argument. We're trying to solve the problem. And so we should choose our words carefully. We should, with our words, kind of convey a message that says, I want to bring about a peaceful resolution. I need to have a conciliatory tone that the other party can hear. Because when they can hear what I'm saying and what I'm trying to do is solve the problem, what I'm doing is I'm giving God a chance to work in this situation so that the conflict can be avoided and a resolution can be found. So, control your tongue. Practice patience. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is his glory to overlook an offense. Now, I know that's way easier said than done. But patience really does work. And he talks about overlooking an offense. But I think it'd be better for us because there's a part of us, evangelicals, that don't like the idea of overlooking offenses. No, that's wrong. We need to deal with it. So let's say instead of overlook a matter, look beyond the matter to what could be if we give God a chance to work. And that kind of patience really does work. I told you a couple weeks ago, Spurgeon used to tell his students, it's good to have one blind eye and one deaf ear. Because it really is helpful, because I don't know about you, I'm not perfect. I doubt that you are. And because we're all imperfect, giving people some grace, I think, is really important. I don't think we should measure people at their worst. I don't think we should jump all over people when they're having a bad day. I think that's the day we should cut them some slack. But here's what I know. In fact, I was having a conversation with a friend this week, and we somehow got down this road where I pointed out, we don't go from 1 to 10. We go from 1 to 2, and 2 to 3. And sometimes from 3 back to 2, right? Now, if you go from 3 back to 2, and I jump all over you, more than likely you're going to go from 2 to 1, not 2 to 3. And that's what I mean. It is to a man's glory to overlook an offense, because growth and change, we have spent our whole life becoming us. Spent our whole life. This is how I think. This is how I see things. This is how I make choices. This is how I make decisions. And we're not perfect. And every now and then that imperfection rubs against someone else, and we have a conflict, and we got to resort or work it out. But we don't go from 1 to 10 in that working out process. We don't go from 1 to 10 in that change process. And if when that person who's trying hard and making improvement reverts back to the norm, and we jump all over them, we are stifling the change process. That's when, okay, I'm going to look beyond that. I'm going to have a blind eye. I'm going to have a deaf ear. I'm not going to measure you as far as this moment is concerned, because I know you're better than that. So I'm going to give you some grace and cut you some slack. And it really does work. it diffuses a lot of contention. Control your emotions. Oh, did I push that button? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Control your emotions. Like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks self-control. Now, what Solomon is pointing out, and it deals with the ancient world, and again, it's one of those things where if in modern warfare a city had a wall around it, would it matter? Nope. We've got airplanes and missiles and bombs and fly right over that wall and blow stuff up. But in ancient times, the main form of defense was a wall. And a city that did not have a wall was totally defenseless. Any army could march right in. There's no obstacles. There's nothing getting in the way. There's nothing hindering it from entering the city and taking the city. And Solomon says that is what we are like when we do not have control of our emotions. Because again, in the midst of conflict, the goal that we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to solve a problem. But when our emotions kick in, it is really easy to get angry and say things we should not say. It's very easy to wallow in despair and lose hope. We need to control our emotions because that allows us to focus on the problem and find a resolution. We need to reject defensiveness. We also looked at this earlier in our study. But it really is an important element because in the midst of conflict, more than likely, we're going to hear things we don't like, we don't want to hear. And we'll disagree with that. And that's okay. But a lot of times we start taking it personally. And we start getting offended. And what I mean by that is, because this is what happens. Because if we're having conflict, what generally is true is person A has disappointed person B, and person B has disappointed person A. And we get a log jam. I can't hear your complaint. I can't see your complaint because I've got a whole boatload of complaints and they are blocking out the sun. And so you're over there and you bring something up, and my response is, how dare you bring that up? Don't you realize all the stuff you've pulled? You ever have that? It's very real. And that's about when we start getting defensive. And we reach into our pocket and start pulling out excuses. We start shifting the blame. We start rationalizing and justifying whatever we've said, whatever we've done. And what that does is it leaves us stymied. It leaves us polarized. We're stuck. And the goal is we're trying to diffuse contention. And the reality is, in most contention, it takes two people to make a mess. Now, there might be one person that's 60% responsible and the other 40%. It might be 70-30. It might be 99-1. But most of the time, the reason we're here is because we've both contributed. And when we own that, as opposed to getting defensive, as the proverb says, he who ignores discipline comes to poverty and shame. But whoever heeds correction is honored. He who listens to life-giving rebuke will be at home among the wise, but he who ignores discipline despises himself. But whoever heeds correction gains understanding. When we are able to own our part of the problem, we're taking that step towards solving the problem. And that's our last item. question is, how do we do that? Well, I think that starts by clarifying the goal, and I've said it several times. The goal is solving the problem. Our culture, and I don't know if you've realized this, but our culture has programmed us to win arguments or assign blame or figure out who's right and who's wrong. Now, not that any of those things are wrong, but the reality is you can win the argument, you can assign blame, you can figure out who's right and who's wrong. If the problem hasn't been solved, all of that was wasted energy. The goal is solve the problem. We have to find an answer. And to find an answer, I think we have to do two things. Number one, we have to approach it as an internalist. I haven't talked about this in a while, and so I'm going to develop it just for a second. If I see the problem as outside of me, for instance, my problem is you. What am I saying? I have no part in the solution. I cannot contribute to the solution because the problem is outside of me. It's you, or it's that, or it's this. And I don't control this, that, or you. There's only one person I control. You know who it is? It's me. Now, an internalist doesn't say, oh, there are no problems outside of me. No, there's a boatload of problems outside of me. They're just not mine. I have nothing to do with them. The only person I have control of is me. And as an internalist, I have to figure out how to deal with you and this or that in a constructive way. And as soon as I say, you're the problem, I'm saying I have no part in it. I can't solve it. But you can contribute to solving it. And so that's what an internalist says. Okay, I'm not trying to change. It is amazing how often we think the answer to a problem is you have to change and I'm perfect. Do you see what I'm saying? So number one, I have to be an internalist. And as an internalist, then I can take advantage of some very helpful conflict resolution strategies. And they should all be somewhat familiar, and I'm sure you've used them all. The first, probably the most common, is compromise. And the only thing I would point out about compromise is we live in a world where compromise is achieved via negotiation. And I don't like that one bit, and there's a reason why I don't like it one bit. It's because you inevitably will feel you got shortchanged. We have an eyesight problem as followers of Jesus. We can see specks of imperfection outside of us, and we can have a big old log in our own eye and not see it. And so we negotiate, we come to a resolution. I'm looking at you, and you're not giving it your best effort. But me, I am giving 200%. In fact, on a good day, I'm giving 1,000%, and you're not even trying. And that's because I got an eyesight problem, and so do you. So I don't like the idea of negotiation, but I very much like the idea of love. If you love that person that you're in conflict with, do you remember when you were dating? What were you doing when you were dating? You were fishing. You were looking for ways to attract that person. So go back to the dating days and think, okay, I'm going to move towards this person, try to be agreeable, try to be pleasant, try to bring about a resolution. So I'm moving this way, and they're moving this way, not because we're negotiating, but because I love you. And I don't want to be in conflict with you because I love you. And life is better when we're acting like we're in love than when we say we're in love and we're acting like cats and dogs, right? So I'm moving this way and you're moving this way, and we're going to bump into each other somewhere in the middle of that process. And again, I don't care if it's 70-30, 60-40, 80, I don't care if it's 99-1. When the problem's solved, you know what that's called? Success. Celebrate success. So compromise. Number 2, concession. I can simply choose to concede my position. I'll give you an example. I'm not positive who told my wife about this stuff called hexclad. I think it was my daughter, but I don't know that for a fact. Hexclads are pots and pans. Very expensive pots and pans. I am frugal, but I have a wife who really likes to cook, and she cooks really well. And she started pointing out that she wanted some hexclad. And this is a perfect illustration, because hexclad is really important to her. You know how important hexclad is to Vince? On a scale of 1 to 100, it might get to a 1. I really don't care. But I do care about having a happy wife. I do care that my happy wife cooks really delicious food for me. The only thing I don't want is I don't want to be 400 pounds. So don't cook too much. So we have started collecting hexclad. You know why? Because it's really important to her, and I don't really care. It's no big deal. Now, if we were talking fishing stuff or hunting stuff or golfing stuff, it'd be a different story. Concession. Thirdly, you can coexist. And here you just simply recognize some things aren't worth fighting over. Now, I think it's funny. If you buy a bumper sticker that says coexist, please act like it. Because my experience with the people with the Subarus and the coexist bumper stickers, they practice tolerance engineering. And if you don't agree with their idea of coexist is you give up all rights and do it my way. And unless you agree with me, we're not coexisting. I'm going to blow up your Tesla. So coexist actually means coexist. And if you don't love the person, and I use husbands and wives because it's easiest. If you don't love the person you're living with more than ice cubes, or more than breadcrumbs, or more than does the toilet paper come over the top or under the bottom, and stuff like that, then you got really serious problems. Because I love everyone in my family more than that. And it's not worth fighting over. Coexist. Lastly, creative alternatives. Thing with the creative alternative, you either find them by accident or you go out and look for them. Maybe it's a financial issue. Maybe it's a relational issue. And you're kind of polarized. You know, I'm thinking this and you're thinking this, and we stumble upon something that wow, we didn't see that, and it's a win-win. Often you have to go look for them. Okay, we can't seem to figure this out. Let's go get some counseling. We can't seem to figure this out. Let's talk to a financial advisor. And they say, have you ever thought about? And they throw something out there, and it's like light bulbs go off, and it's like, wow, that's the perfect solution. It's not my way. It's not your way. It's a creative alternative, and it's a win-win situation. Let me wrap this up for today. Jesus told us in Luke 17, and we know it to be true, things that cause people to sin, things like conflict, are bound to come. They're inevitable. We live in a broken world amongst broken people. He also told us we better rise above it. When will all men know you are following Jesus? When we're right. Nope. when we have good theology. Nope. When you love one another. It is possible to love the people we are in conflict with. That's the whole gist of bold love, by the way. I'll give it another commercial. I ought to get royalties from that Dan DeLander. I really should. I recommend that book so often. It's possible to love people we're in conflict with, but we're probably going to have to grow into that reality. Because like I said earlier, we've spent our whole life developing. I don't know when we first started having conflict, but we've spent, from somewhere, 1 year old, 2 year old, and we start experiencing. We've developed a whole way of this is how I think, this is how I feel, and this is how I respond when I'm in a conflict situation. That kind of thing does not change overnight. Growth is a process, and processes take time. But what we did this morning is we've looked at Solomon and said, here's some things. Here's 7 specific things that we can do to get better at dealing with conflict. He's made us aware it's a real threat. He's shown us 7 steps to take to resolve it. And so basically what he's done is he's put the ball in our court. It's like, okay, I've given you some tools to work with. You're going to experience conflict the rest of your life. You can go in the toolbox and use some of these tools, or you can ignore them and continue to have conflict. The ball's in our court. I want to close with this thought. Blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called sons of God. I would like when people look at me to say, that guy looks like one of God's sons. Isn't that a cool thought? When do we do that, kind of in like normal everyday things? When we see a resemblance. That guy looks like that guy. I bet you that's his son. Right? We do that kind of stuff. I would like people to look at me and say, that guy looks like the Son of God. Blessed are the peacemakers. They're the ones that will be called the sons of God. Let's pray together. Father, thank you so much for the scriptures this morning. We don't necessarily like conflict, but boy, oh boy, we sure do experience it. And I have seen times when people in conflict were willing to address things in the way we've talked about this morning. And they are better and closer and stronger today than they ever would have been if the conflict had never arisen. The fact that the problem was known and addressed led to them being better. And I pray that would be true in each of our lives, in each of our relationships. There is no such thing as utopia, happily ever after. We're going to have problems with everyone that we deal with because we're all imperfect. Where we live in is a broken place. So may we figure out how to turn conflict into a bonding experience so that we are stronger and we are better as a result. I lift this up to you, Father, with the hope that when people see us and how we deal with conflict, that we would be called the sons of God. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.